right, everybody, welcome to Dialogue. I am here today. I've got a special guest. We'll see how special he is. See how well this goes if we ever do a second
Exactly.
episode.
Well, Jesus loves me, so there.
So I'm here with Dr. John Kulaga. Dr. Kulaga is a longtime friend, and he is the president of Indiana Wesleyan University. And he's a guy who's a frequent speaker at our church, at ONE.CHURCH, and is just somebody I just really enjoy your company. One of the things I love to do is to share my friends with my other friends. So when I have somebody particularly who I just enjoy talking with, and you and I have had so many great dialogues and conversations, and there was no recording of it. And you usually walk away thinking, man, I wish we would have recorded that. I wish I could share that with more people. So we're going to get to do that today. And I just really appreciate you being here. I didn't warn you about any questions or anything. You have no idea what we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
So we'll see how you do on your feet here.
Exactly.
First of all, Dr. Kulaga, take a moment, if you don't mind, give us a little bit of background about maybe, where you grew up, a little bit of that. And then I know a lot of your life has been, your professional career has been in higher ed.
Right.
Done a lot of that. So why don't you give us kind of a little bit of that background?
Okay. Well, first of all, this is great to be with you. I love coming over to Columbus and just being involved with ONE.CHURCH. It's still, Lena and I consider it our home church. And I'm so grateful for the day that you and I became fast friends. And so I'll always thank the Lord for that.
We really did too, man. It's like, some people, like, chemistry is a funny thing. Like there's people I've been around a long time and you keep trying to have chemistry, and then you have certain people you meet and it's just like, it's like you've kind of known each other forever. And you're one of those people for me that,
likewise.
I've always enjoyed it, but it was like immediate. So
yeah, and we don't like, we're not in touch every day or see each other. I mean, I live in a different state, but when we are together, it's like, boom. It's like we were just together.
Yeah.
Pick up right where we left off, and that's a special gift.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. I was born and raised in Flint, Michigan. My dad was a public school educator, teacher, principal, superintendent. So I grew up in the Flint area, then around the Flint area as he changed jobs. We kind of orbited around that. So loved that. I'm the middle child. I got an older brother, younger brother. And education was really important to my parents. My dad would always be like, you don't have to get straight A's, you just need to do your best. And then it'd be like, then wait for the other shoe to drop, but I know your best is an A. So we weren't allowed to bring home C's because that he perceived that wasn't our best. So education was real important. So there was never any doubt growing up, if I'd go to school, it'd be where. But I had a great childhood. My mom and dad just loved the church. Back in the day, which is in the 70s when I was growing up, there was little volunteer offices that are called Sunday school superintendent. So my dad was that, whatever that did. I mean, he was
basically give the announcements.
He was that. He was he was in charge of Sunday school, all of Sunday school. I don't know what that was. My mom was the church secretary. I still remember going over on Saturday mornings and running the bulletins with the blue mimeograph machine, the smell of the ink, folding them and having them ready.
If you could smell that right now, it would bring a tear to your eye.
It would definitely bring back. I would think of my mom and hand cranking the mimeograph machine and the smell. It's one of those things. So I went to college to be a youth pastor. I was going to be an architect, only for no other reason than I was good in math and loved to draw, and my brother was going to school to be an architect. So I thought, okay. Senior year, the Lord got a hold of me and just had different plans. So decided to go into youth ministry, and went to school for that. And went out to Kansas, where I was right out of college at a church in the middle of Kansas. Literally, if you drew an X across the state of Kansas, the town in the middle would be where I was, in McPherson. And so I was right out of college, and my wife was coming home from college as a sophomore, so she wasn't in my youth group. But I was the new youth pastor, and we met and started dating and got married. And
that's cool.
We did that, and I was a youth pastor for 4 years, and after a while, I just felt like, I was doing 7th through 12th grade. I had a youth group of a couple hundred, and we had a choir and a quiz team, and things were going well, but, I found this other job, this other thing they asked me to do was teach the college Sunday school class. And I was finding more and more joy out of that and less doing the 7th, 8th grade thing.
Yeah.
I loved individual 7th and 8th graders, but as a group, not so much. So then I felt like I could go back to higher ed and work in student affairs. So it'd be like having your youth group, but without the parents. So
At that time, you have your bachelor's?
I have my bachelor's in philosophy, religion, youth ministry, but I knew I'd have to go back and get my master's. So we moved back to Michigan into a men's residence hall. So I started out as a men's RD, and Lena was teaching elementary school. I was being an RD and going to grad school at night, got my master's, then slowly became like an assistant dean of students. We went back to Kansas for my doctorate. I became a vice president for student affairs. Came back to Michigan after my doctorate, became a vice president for advancement, then moved into faculty, eventually became a provost, chief academic affairs officer, moved to Kentucky to do that. And then in 2017, we moved to Ohio to become the president of a Christian institution here in Ohio, and that's where we landed at ONE.CHURCH. So that's how we met, and I think Scott, one of your producers, is my son, and I think he found.
You think he is?
He found. Well, I know he's one of your
the
producers.
DNA test says.
I know he's my son. I think he's called a producer. Let me clarify certainty here. But I think Scott was the one who found ONE.CHURCH first, and slowly our whole family started trickling in. And did the presidency there for 5 years, and then eventually in 2022 landed at Indiana Wesleyan. So I've been at 5 institutions, 5 different states. I've had actually every vice president's job in higher ed except CFO, which there's reasons why I'm not the CFO.
Well, you know what's interesting, like listening to you at the beginning, you said when you were growing up, I'll make sure I heard this right, you were good at math and drawing.
Yeah.
Is that what you said?
Yeah.
So that's interesting. You know, I like to watch like young people as they're kind of growing and developing, especially when they have some diverse gifts. So when you think about math, obviously that speaks to the pragmatic part of your brain, and then the drawing, the creative part of your brain. And when you have those two in tandem, have you noticed the way those two dimensions of you have showed up in leadership? So you've got the academic, or again, the very logical side, but then also the more outside the box drawing. It's just interesting, those two in tandem and how they show up. Is that?
Well,
accurate?
it's different parts of your brain, right? You're accessing the right side and the left side. If you meet somebody who, I was flying home with a gentleman last night. I was in D.C. and I was talking with a gentleman. He's an engineer, aeronautical engineer, but he said he grew up. He was very good in math and music, and I said those two are always together. It's all
really?
Yeah. He's someone who's often good in math will often have a musical gift.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
And
what is the connection? Why
well, I think there's just a sense of rhythm and keeping time and keeping beat, and there's there's a mathematicalness to music.
Yeah.
And now, not every mathematicion's a musician, and every
I wouldn't have put those together, because I would have thought of music more, and not that every musician is necessarily creative, because some of them may be more perfectionist around what they're doing and making the instrument do what it does, but not necessarily a songwriter, or not necessarily someone that's going into the full creative element. But I guess I would have thought of that as a fairly rare mix, but you're saying it's not.
I think it's pretty common when you look at the multiple intelligences that are out there, math and music. It's not unusual to find that. And for me, I've just found that there's a side of me that really is comes to me naturally. Is I'm an idea person. I love ideating. I have way more ideas than our university can possibly do, or that we have money to do. But that's where I really find joy, is in that process of creating ideas and inventing. Not necessarily pondering and sitting in my office thinking about, I wonder, what if there's part of that, but part of it is just let's think of something new, and I love that. But then there's the implementer part. How are we going to get this across the finish line?
Yeah.
And that's probably where the mathematical part comes in, is you got to have a strategy.
Yeah.
And you got to have a system for getting this across the line. But the first thing is you got to have an idea.
Yeah.
And that's really, I love brainstorming.
Yeah.
And some people are good at it, and some people, they need to recognize that may not be their gift.
Yeah. From time to time, I'll call you and run a theological idea by you or a sermon idea by you, and just I want to hear your reaction. I want to hear if something, if you have a difference of opinion or a different thought. I really love the way your brain works, and I respect all of the diligent study that you've done over the years and compiled in your mind. So I appreciate you giving me access to that. I remember one time I called you, it was a couple Christmases ago, and I was like, hey, I got this idea for Christmas message. And so I kind of preached a Cliff Notes version over the phone to you, and you gave me some thoughts. And then before we hung up, I was like, hey, how are you doing? Because I think you had just taken the job in Indiana Wesleyan. And I was like, how's it going? And you said, man, for really the first time in my life, I am fully drowning in opportunity.
Yeah.
Like I am just like drowning. Like I have so many opportunities. I don't know what to do with them. And then you used this really creative analogy. You said, you're like, opportunities are like frogs. And if you kiss the frog, some of them will turn into princes.
Yeah.
But if you kiss a frog, some of the frogs, they just stay frogs. And every time you kiss a frog, it costs a bunch of money.
Yeah.
So like it's part of my job as a president to decide which frogs are most likely to be princes, and aim our resources at kissing those frogs.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, that's so good. And that one stuck with me. And so I want to talk about that a little bit,
right.
Like what you've learned about frog kissing, what you've learned about trying to anticipate opportunity in front of you that really could turn into something magical and amazing and effective. And what, you just end up with dirty lips.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, ending up with dirty lips is that's the price you pay, right? Yeah. Yeah. I wish I had the gift. I think I have some gifts of discernment, like what's an idea is good or not. Some people, you trust your gut, but you also listen to the voices in the room.
Yeah.
But sometimes you just don't know because everything is presented to you with such positive
grand possibility.
Oh yeah, you don't want to miss out
It's the
on
next
that.
big thing.
Yeah, I mean, so we'll get called about, do you want to buy this school? Colleges are going out of business, and so it's like this would be awesome, and they send you the pro forma on the school, and you're thinking, well, I would like to be president of that school. That sounds awesome. I mean, the other one's approaching you to see if you can buy them out. I think I've learned to really be patient and really go through a more due diligence and because I'm excited about ideas and new opportunities. And now at Indiana Wesleyan, we're in a financial position to be able to do things. And so we want to be good stewards of the resources, the excess revenue that we're generating. I don't want to squander it. And I think I'm the most patient person. Mm-hmm. I don't do lines well. I'm a line.
Pay for the fast pass.
I'm a lane changer. Yeah. I'm a line shifter. And the Lord has given me this impatience, but he's also given me a gift. And that is I'm able to pick the slowest line no matter what store I'm in. I have the gift of picking the line that will go slowest. I think that's the way the Lord is working on me, right? Yeah. He says, yeah, you still got some edges here. Go in that line because it's going to take forever.
I think it's a tension to be managed because a sense of urgency is important. Yeah. I think some people, they would attribute patience is a virtue for sure. And I think, but some of that comes with wisdom of knowing when are we using the virtue of patience as this default excuse for our lack of action or right. our paralysis by analysis, or we're lacking urgency or proactivity. And so I think knowing yourself and knowing what you have a tendency to do, but I think I'd be curious to know from you, based on both successes and failures, where you were kind of learning along the way. Hey, yeah, we're doing our due diligence. I'm listening to the voices. I'm looking at the pro forma and the metrics and, all of the factors that make this a potentially great opportunity. Are there things that you really ended up as princes, or you were able to really get it right, and then ones that you kind of do a post-mortem, you look back and go, man, we got ahead of ourselves. We got, is there a pattern in there that you would say kind of guides you in the future, could help me and us?
Well, first of all, I think for me, I'm trying to create a culture where I'm at, where you have to create a culture where there's not a fear of failure. And so you don't want somebody to feel like if they kiss a frog and it never turns into a prince that they failed. The reason you don't know is because they're disguised as a frog. And so, you want to create a culture where your people are not afraid to attempt new things, not afraid to try new things. I love the quote from this morning's leadership conference, but that you had about golf, and that is, don't follow a bad shot with a dumb one. And that's where you learn, okay, what did you learn from it? Okay, we failed at this, but let's do the postmortem. Let's see, why were we attracted to this? What was really driving us? And
we took a big swing and we duffed our drive. Let's not be undisciplined in our next shot.
Right.
Let's take our medicine. Let's put it out in the fairway and take a stroke instead of taking 5 strokes because we're trying to be heroes in this next undisciplined swing. Right.
And so in higher ed, where I'm at, there's all these opportunities to you need to go international, and you need to go online, and you need to, partner here, and you need to partner there. I remember at one of my institutions, I flew to China 2 or 3 times, and because, China was opening up, they were opening up these different institutes, and there was opportunity to get students, and they're full pay. International students are always full pay because they don't get access to United States federal financial aid, and they don't want them. The government is like, you can't have them in the country and then they can't get home, so you got to pay their education. And so that's, a lot of schools chase that, and I was in China 2 or 3 times, signing all kinds of agreements with all kinds of schools, going out for dinner and just doing all this work, and nothing came of it, nothing. And I think as I look back on that, it was like, what I learned from that was that you can't go to China. China's a big country, 1 billion people. You need to have strategic partners in those countries who are there for you when you're home, because depending on the country you're working with or with the partner, they're way more patient with the process. In fact, the process really is what they're interested in, more than actually the product. So my name is on lots of papers over in China. But I can't really tell you that a student came to my school because of the work I did. So be more intentional, be more diligent, have a partner, have someone who can actually represent you well, is something that I've learned from that. That was a big whiff. A lot of, it's a lot of time on the plane, a lot of time on the ground. And sometimes opportunities present yourself, and you do have to trust your gut. I was in Indiana I was in my new job for just a couple of months, and the largest coding academy in Indianapolis, software coding, which is not really a degree that we had offer, but this coding academy was up for availability to buy. And we had to form a 501c3, buy the coding academy, get it signed, pass it by my board, and get the deal done in 6 weeks. And you didn't have time to really do due diligence. But we went for it. And now we have a coding academy. My person would tell me, you don't have a coding academy, you have an academy. Right now, all we offer is coding. So, so I want to clarify that. So we have the 1150 Academy that offers coding. It's certificates, but now we have 3. They're stackable. We have opportunities to deliver that in various churches. It gives us a presence in Indianapolis. And it's an opportunity that just, you didn't have time. Either jump or don't jump. And so that one turned out well.
So I just had a flashback. So I was thinking back on the decisions that I made that maybe weren't catastrophic, but they were mistakes, or it wasn't. I was learning how to be a better decision maker, but I was thinking back. I think sometimes the liability in decision making is sort of embedded in your strength. So I do like ideas. I do like innovation. I do like blank slates and blank whiteboards and asking big questions and all this. So I remember when we started the church, and I had this kind of core team, and we started with all these big grand questions like, hey, if we were starting church all from scratch, we had a total blank slate, what would we do? And so all of it's not that that's a wrong question to ask, but I really loved the question, and I enjoyed really the brain space of exploring all of that type of possibility. But what I ended up doing, and I think some of it is a desire to be an innovator, a desire to do and go into uncharted waters and do things better.
Right.
I started blank sheeting pretty much everything. So we're like, hey, let's come up with our own process of integrating people in the church and next steps. And so it was like every system, okay, because I have sort of this innovation gene,
Mm-hmm.
I went and innovated a bunch of stuff that frankly we probably should have just at least copied and pasted as a first draft. Like you don't need a blank sheet everything.
There are best practices.
There are best practices, and you can kind of start there. And of course, you can run those through your whatever your grid is and make them your own. But I think sometimes, like, okay, so if you have a strength of innovation, or you like being the tip of the spear, early adopter, or innovator, and that's even part of your identity. Okay, I want to be a leader, and we want to be a university, or we want to be a church, we want to be an entity, organization that is way out front. Sometimes that desire can kind of force you and almost seduce you into decisions that might be cutting edge, but might not be that wise. And part of it might be that you have this drive that you kind of need to be the first one through the door. You kind of want to be the first, unique.
Right.
Or
well, there's a desire to have, like in my world of higher ed, one of the words that's used all the time is differentiation. There's lots of Christian colleges. What makes you different? Why would someone go to your school as opposed to the other school? What's your different? So you have this. There's a little bit of a drive to be unique.
Yeah, and if you're not careful, that can kind of take over and become this unhealthy craving that I kind of need to be this. And so therefore we're trying these, maybe being a bit undisciplined in our decision making, or going like, hey, we this thing really does glitter. And if we do it, it's got a lot of sizzle and a lot of pop, and it's a differentiator. And going, hey, there's nothing wrong with wanting to kind of play your unique part in the big picture. But if I don't have self-awareness and we don't have group awareness around, that might get a little too big, and it might be have a little bit too much gravity pulling, and it might cause us to waste some money or to do some things that, if we don't need that quite so much. Like, we understand, we're aware of the value of that. But if we don't need it that much, it might help us to actually make some more disciplined decisions.
Well, I think part of that comes down, your role as the lead pastor and my role as president carries with it the liability that the more passion that we generate and give to an idea, we are communicating to the team, this is a done deal. Well, look how excited he is. I mean, who's going to tell Greg no? I mean, he's all amped. So I think, I was at the Bible Museum last night for an event, and they just opened this venue called All Creation Sings, and it's a worship experience. And the closing song is sung by our university choir. So I was there just to represent and talk with the people. And in the event, it talked about the creation, and it used the Old Testament word is tov, T-O-V, and it means good. And God said, God said that it was good. And good meaning it is fulfilling the purpose for which it was created. So I was sitting there in the middle of this worship experience, and I'm thinking about my team. And I'm thinking about, I have a good team. And what that can mean is that I have good people on my team. But do I have a good team? I mean, I'm an ideator. I love ideas, but sometimes I may lack discernment about what's really good or bad. So who on my team has the gift of discernment? You might have the ability to galvanize people and get them excited. But if you're the only galvanizer on your team, if you're the only person generating, then you're going to get exhausted. And it may not be what you like to do. It may not be your gift, but you can do it. You're competent, but it's burning you out. Or you may not have anybody on your team who can actually push something across the finish line. Like, people who love ideas, they can generate ideas, they can spin off ideas, but they're distracted on the next idea, and you just assume the work will get done, but you're not aware of the cost on the team to get that work done, and you're not even worried about getting across the finish line. You're just assuming it's going to get, but that's somebody's gift. Somebody has that gift of getting things across the line. Somebody has the gift of galvanizing. Somebody has the gift of ideating. There are people on your team, and what you need to look at is, do I have a team that actually has all of these, Patrick Lencioni talks about geniuses, work geniuses, and there's 6 of them. And everybody has 2, and your team might lack a certain genius, and so therefore you're having to, or somebody's having to pick up the slack, and they're doing something that isn't what they were created to do. And so you may have good people, but you may not have a good team if you look at it from that perspective. And so for me, I've got to step back and go, okay, I need help evaluating. So we just went through a strategic planning process at the university to come up with a new strategic plan, and we had 19 listening sessions. We had over 500 people, and we came up with 121 strategic ideas. And
that's a lot.
That's a lot, and there's no way that's going into a strategic plan, because I'm not.
That's enough for the next 1,000 years.
Exactly. Well, my job is to set the next 12 presidents up.
Yeah.
So we had to figure out a way to get down to something manageable, and we've got it down to 12. And part of it is, are they startable, are they scalable, and are they sustainable? Because some of them were great ideas, but they weren't sustainable. It was going to be short. It wasn't going to scale it. It was kind of like, I don't know, this isn't the idea, but let's start a geology major. It's like, well, we could start that. We can't scale it, and no one's really interested in necessarily majoring in no one, but a lot of people aren't. So, but we had to have a lot of voices speaking into that, and some of them I was really passionate about that didn't make the list, and some that I wasn't as excited about made the list, because you have to get people in there who can discern, this is really important to our culture right now. This is really important to who we are as a university.
Yeah.
And ideating people, just we got to have people that we listen to and say and calm us down a little bit.
Yeah. I think one of the shifts I've made mentally, I'm a future oriented guy by nature, so I do always tend to be thinking about what's next. Sometimes even to the detriment of fully appreciating the wins right now, or I don't tend to be a big celebrator.
Yeah.
Like after we're done, like, oh, good, high five, cool. What's tomorrow? I kind of just immediately, and sometimes can even look over, peer over the near term, really looking at the big picture, or the long term.
Yep.
And
are you a Enneagram 8?
Yeah.
Yeah. So am I.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of my nature, and I've lived a lot of my life that way. And I think what it sometimes has done is, besides the obvious liabilities of that, of just not being present or enjoying or appreciating what's happening now, is sometimes I get so caught up trying to predict the future, trying to anticipate where the puck is going and where the world is going.
Exactly.
That I end up overthinking, the present decisions based on where I think the future is going to be. And now that I'm in my mid 40s now, I've been leading for 20 years. I've had enough of those that I thought I had a pretty good read on where everything was going. And so then I made present decisions based on what I thought the future was going to be. And I've just missed quite often. And so I don't think you take your eye off of the future. I think you have to have one eye on the future and trying to analyze that. And I think that's part of being particularly the point leader, the president or the head of something.
Yep.
But I think I've probably brought that down a little bit in terms of my near-term decisions. Like I think I've started to learn, like, that's I don't know where that's going. Like, here's what I think. So that's going to inform our current decisions. But I'm a lot more in the what is right today. Like, what is the best decision today? I don't know what pandemics are out there. I don't know what huge cultural shifts are out there. I don't know what disruptive technologies are out there. I mean, I can look at AI. I can look at, consumer trends. I can look at those type of things and get some kind of idea. But I'm not going to get too caught up in that. I'm going to go, what is working now? What is, in the next year or two, where do we need to put wind in the sails, put gas on the fire, and let's make the right decision for today, and not do it ignorant of the future. Like
Right.
it's part of the conversation, but I feel like I've shifted that a little bit. I used to be more like everything was setting up for the future, and I've kind of shaded it a little bit more that way. What's your reaction to that? Does that resonate with you, or do you think differently around?
Well,
that?
no, I think for me, COVID was one of those wake up calls or experiences where you're like, nobody saw it coming. We all had 5-year strategic plans. We all had things we were going to do. And then, March 2020 came and it was like, nope, send all the kids home, go online, you're done for the year. And nobody saw that coming. So the idea that we had a 5-year strategic plan that we just took and just threw it in the trash, because now we went to survival mode. In Christian higher ed, a lot of schools clicked into survival mode. And some of them are still, quite frankly, that's where they're at still today. So I think for me, you need to be future oriented. You need to be looking out. We're looking at AI, but for me, I think I've narrowed, like our strategic plan we just announced, or we're going to announce, is a 3-year plan. Yeah, I don't do 8-year plans. But we're not starting all 12. We're gonna roll them out over a period of 3 years. Some will be fully mature in 3 years. Some will be green lighted and going in 3 years, and some will be just getting off the ground. So I think, like you said, we need to be studying. We need to be looking. That's part of our job. There's a theory that in Africa, the other animals look to the giraffe to see if it's safe or not. If the giraffe is nervous and looking around and getting jittery, they're nervous and jittery, and they get closer to the giraffe. And part of it is because the giraffe's neck is so high, he can see what's going on the horizon, and if he's calm, they're calm. And I think that's part of our job, is to look in the future. But I think I've narrowed the future down a little bit closer to the time horizon, and go, I don't know what 5 years is going to look like. But we do need to project. But let's get closer. Let's see what we're doing well, and do it better. Let's see what's not working, and talk about eliminating it. Matter of fact, in our strategic plan, I have innovate, elevate, and eliminate. And some people were pushing back on that, going, "Why would you put eliminate in your strategic plan?" It's like, well, the Bible talks about pruning. Oh, yeah. And sometimes what happens is that we're afraid to eliminate an academic program. We're afraid to eliminate a department. We're afraid to eliminate maybe let somebody go, that would be better for the health of the organization. Bring somebody in who has a different skill set that would bring what the team needs. Mm-hmm. And so I want that pruning process to just be part of the culture. Some things we're going to innovate, it's going to be brand new, and it's going to be awesome. Some things are going well. We're going to throw more gas on the fire, put some resources behind it, make it better. And some things, we gave them 3 to 5 years. It didn't work out, no problem, but we're not going to support it anymore. And just live with that and learn from that. And but part of that is that honest evaluation, but continuous evaluation. Mm-hmm. And if you're looking at today, what's working today, and really asking that question, but also looking at what's working today, it's like the 8-track tape is working great. You don't need to worry about anything else. It's like, well, it was working. Well, I would debate that it was ever working great when a song would go down and kerchunk and the song would come back up. I mean, 8 tracks were a bad idea from the get-go, but we moved very fastly from 8-track to CD to MP3 to where, that was lightning fast.
Yeah.
When you think about how long we had records.
Yeah.
So you need to see where the puck is going. But I agree. I think for me, the horizon, the time horizon is a little closer.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting, observing you and your season, right? So you have how many years of work experience? Like how long have is your career been?
I graduated. Actually, this is my 40th year out of college.
Yeah. So in so many ways, you have this.
Thanks for letting me say that publicly. I appreciate that.
Hey, no shame. No shame. None at all. It's a rich reservoir of experiences and wisdom, and in many ways, I think it has you in your prime, right? Because you've got all this collection of data and experience, and we were talking this morning about how life experience has tremendous assets and some sort of hidden or not so hidden liabilities.
Yeah.
Right. So the obvious advantage of experience is you've been there, done that. You've been around the block a few times. You've mapped some patterns with your brain, and you've cracked some codes. So you can kind of go, yep, seen that before. Here's how we deal with that. And that's always nice, right? To go to war with a general that's seen a few battlefields and can anticipate the enemy and all of that. The downside of experience is that things do change, and not everything that rhymes, right? As Mark Twain says,
right.
History never repeats itself, but it often rhymes. And sometimes we can think that something that rhymes is a song we've heard before, and it's like, nope, that's a different song.
Right.
This is not that.
Right.
And it might rhyme with that, but it's fundamentally different. So the been there, done that has an advantage of giving you some experience to draw on, but it also could create a been there, done that mentality. So now I'm applying previous lessons to what is in front of me that might be different.
Right.
How do you manage that? How do you stay curious? How do you make sure that you can glean all that you can from where you've been and what you've done and what you've learned, without it becoming a blind spot to where you go, I'm right and I know and I'm a veteran.
Yeah.
How do you do that in this unique season of your life?
Well, I think I love that phrase, this is not that. And so I've done that, and I've done that at 5 institutions, but I'm brand new at the one I'm at right now. So while I have done student affairs at an institution, I've done advancement at an institution, I've done chief academic officer, provost, chief operating officer at an institution, I haven't done those things at this institution, and I haven't been president of Indiana Wesleyan before. So I have a new culture, I have new people, I have a new setting. So reminding myself of that helps me to understand that while I've done this before, I've never done this here before. The second thing that is not to try to replicate what you did before, because again, I was a vice president of advancement when 9/11 hit. That was a really bad time to be in the fundraising game. When you think about what happened to the stock market, the NASDAQ, all that just plummeted. Everybody felt immediately poor. No one was giving money away. Well, that was a tough season to be a VP for advancement. But that is not what's happening today. So I can't necessarily glean all my experience and say, well, I'll tell you what it's like to be a VP for advancement. Well, yeah, but that was in 2000, 2001, 2002. What I try to take from my experience, and I can't say I'm perfect on this though, is I understand that when we get to the other side of whatever we're going through, so whatever I need to walk with my team through, the Lord has been faithful, and I'm still here. And so my panic is less. There's less fear. When I was young and trying to prove myself maybe, I didn't want anything to go wrong. I was so guarded in terms of I was going to always be successful. You got to climb the ladder. And I don't think I'm going to climb the ladder and find out I was leaning against the wrong wall. Not that at all, but just this sense of, I'm the breadwinner. I need to provide and I need to excel and achieve, and that's part of my personality. But what I've learned is what experience gives you is a little wisdom and a little calm and a little faith. And even as recent as 9/11 or COVID, we came through a difficult season on college campuses, and colleges are still around. People still have jobs. Kids are still going to school. Now, is it different? Yes. Is it harder? Are less kids going to school? There's things that are different now, but there's just this sense of it'll be okay. That comes with 40 years as opposed to 10.
Yeah.
And that's probably that's the best part of experience.
Yeah.
Have that sense of peace and calm in the midst of a storm. When I was younger, I tended to look at the storm.
Yeah. So I just had this thought. I'm curious. Let me process it real quick and have you react to it. So I was thinking about missiology, right? So the study of missions, right? So
Were you listening to what I said? Your mind was thinking about missiology.
no, I was listening. I was listening. No, I promise it's
No, I
going to tie
promise
in.
it, yeah.
It's going to tie in.
Okay.
So missiology, right, is the study of mission. So if John, if you decided to go to France, if you felt God leading you to France to go be a missionary, okay, what would you do? Right? What would be the process, like in broad strokes?
Well, I would learn French,
Right.
and I would raise money,
Yep.
and I would try to figure out where in France I was going to go, because France is a big country.
Yep.
So I try to narrow down a city.
Yep.
And raise money, get partners, learn French, and figure out where I'm going to live.
Yeah. So if you go to Paris,
Mm-hmm.
okay, and that's where you feel called, so you've learned the language. What else would you do in regards to Paris?
I try to learn the streets. I try to learn the culture.
Yeah.
I try to learn as much as I could about the community, because Paris is big.
Yeah.
So where am I going to start?
Yes. And so I think like that thought process, right? I've got to learn this unique language. I've got to figure out specifically what part of this country, and then what is unique about Paris compared to other cities, or what is unique about this part of Paris compared to other cities. I think going in just thinking, well, I know French, okay, and therefore I'm going to go in and be effective in France would be a mistake.
Right.
To know the difference between growing up in Flint, Michigan versus Paris, France, you need to know those cultural differences. And then even again, within that country, what's unique about this city? We know in our country, you can't just go, well, I'm going to America, therefore it's all the same. I mean, come on.
Right.
Like we have all these huge regional distinctions,
Exactly.
subcultures, and even within a city are subcultures. So when you think about taking your, this isn't that, even though I've been in higher ed or I've been a president in Spain versus France, a president at Ohio, a school in Ohio versus Indiana, not just the difference in the states, but the subcultures in those places.
Sure.
You would want to kind of learn the different dialects. You'd want to learn the different languages. You'd want to learn the subcultures within, and kind of start operating under the assumption that just because I know French and I've been to a city in France doesn't mean I really understand how to be effective in Paris.
Right.
And certainly some of those learnings are helpful, but I think if you kind of take that macro idea and you take it into, okay, you were a manager at this with this company and now I'm going to this one, or you were a vice president at this company or that one. You come in and each one of those, it's like their own country. You got to think like a missiologist. I got to learn a new dialect. I got to learn a new language. I got to find out where these people have been, because part of, history affects culture, affects, why this city does what they do, why that sacred cow is so sacred.
Exactly.
Why the thing that you're talking about eliminating, although very clear to you that it's just a drain on resources, to somebody has a deep, deep entrenched nostalgic value, and it's part of who we are. So we can't just knock that building down because it's taking up space. I think all of that, again, is more of that process that I think the older we get and the more we have success in certain places, I don't think we ever get to the place where we're so experienced in what we do that we can skip that process. We got to kind of go in, think like a missiologist, think like, what new language do I need to learn, and what do I need to learn about, what do I not understand about this place? And the more I can learn about it, have an appreciation for it, now I can figure out, does it need to be changed, or how to be that change agent there without, burning the place to the ground and ending up, with a failure because I made assumptions.
Right.
What are your thoughts?
Well, there's 1,000 thoughts, but I think you're absolutely right. I think part of it is, as a leader, if we're going to talk generically about a leader, I think part of it gets to what have you been called, what have you been asked to do? In some ways, I was asked to disrupt the culture. There was declining enrollment. There was concerns about where the school was going. And I can articulate several things, but when I was hired, I was asked to be a disruptor, as opposed to someone who would come in and say, hey, things are fine. We just want you to be more of a responder, respond to opportunities. Here's some resources. Here's some partners. Here's some things that we think are on the horizon. We need you to respond and discern and implement, as opposed to, are you being asked to disrupt and rebuild? It depends on what you're asked to do. I think that's a real difference. But I think I love the idea, though, of, again, I think part of my personality is I've mentioned before, I'm a little impatient. I don't do well in lines or lanes that aren't moving. And I think being sensitive to being a missiologist and saying, some things have to happen faster, but not everything. Not everything has to happen. You use the building analogy. Okay, if the building has been sitting empty for 8 years and it needs to go down, it doesn't need to go down your first year as president. It's already been here. It may have been here for 40 years, and it's only been empty for the last 10. But you'll be fine. Mm-hmm. That's not the fight you need to pick today. And just use more wisdom and be more patient and realize, that's not really the key thing you need to worry about. I love what the speaker this morning talked about in terms of his 5 vital few. Is that what the vital few is? And what are those 4 or 5 things you need to focus on?
Yeah.
But I think if I were to give advice to myself at any point, especially today, as I look back, I would say, as a missiologist coming into a new arena with new people, new team, new culture, I'm not from the denomination. I am an outsider coming in, and that is focus a little bit more on the relationships and keep your eye on the things the board has asked you to do. Keep an eye on the tasks you have to achieve, but don't sacrifice the relationships in pursuit of a goal.
Yeah. One of my big takeaways of what this conversation is the way you evaluate and analyzed that change in job, because you were already a president of a university and you were evaluating an opportunity to be a president of a different university. And I think some people might look and go, well, is that other university larger? Is it more prestigious? Is it whatever it might be? Might be the thing that would go, I'm going to trade, this job as president for that one. But what you were really doing was looking at the nature of the work that needed to be done and how well did it fit you? Because if you're going from one university to another simply because it's bigger, more prestigious or whatever, you might be going in and doing a bunch of work that isn't really in your wheelhouse or that you're going to enjoy, because it might even be worth taking a step to a smaller university or something with less certainty, but you're like, hey, they need a disruptor, and I love that work. That's how I naturally, I've learned enough about myself to know if you just want me to come in and be a diplomat and just, turn the crank on what's already going, I'm going to drive everyone crazy. That's going to not be I'm not going to have a good quality of life because that's not what I do well. That's not what I love to do. So it might be worth a pay cut. It might be worth, in some ways, what may look like a step down, but to go, I'm going to embrace the work I love to do. So I think often for folks, we look at all the perks of moving up, or even in certain jobs, what is the result that I would get from this versus do I like the nature of the work? That's one thing I've noticed as being a pastor of a church, and we've had many staff members over the years, and I've noticed a pattern in people's experience working here. We've had some who have loved it, and we've had some that have been here almost since the beginning and have stayed, and then we've had some that really didn't like working here. Mm-hmm. And I think what often happens is somebody looks at the job and they go, and that would be a sweet job, like that church is doing a lot of good. Yeah. That church is making a big difference. And they maybe show up to church and they see people having a very good experience, and they hear the testimonies and they see the fruit, and they're like, I want to be a part of that.
Exactly.
And so they're attracted to the fruit, or they're attracted to the result. And then they make an assumption about how they will feel based on the results, based on the fruit. And maybe not fully valuing or thinking about, do I like the work?
Exactly.
Does the work give me intrinsic reward?
Right.
Because you can get caught up in the extrinsic rewards, even noble extrinsic rewards. Wow, when you see somebody's life being changed, I think I had a hand in that. Okay, well, did you like what you had to do Monday through Friday? Because if I hate what I have to do Monday through Friday, but I get this really great feeling every time a life is changed or someone is helped or someone's affected, it's probably not enough to keep you engaged long term. I don't even think that's probably what God intends for you.
No.
Not that every moment you're going to be exhilarated in the work, because everything has its dry seasons or the things you got to power through.
Yep.
But I think, instead of you just looking and going, hey, I want to be the president of this type of university, you were looking at, I want to be the president where what they need from a president is this very specific type of work. Because that work, I can bring value. That work gives me intrinsic reward. That work is awesome. And then you picked accordingly, So I guess I would take that. I think that really transcends, education or ministry or church or whatever. I think that goes into whatever someone's doing, especially as they're evaluating potentially a life shift or a different opportunity, to look and go, does the nature of this work really tee up with what I've proven I love to do?
Right.
And some of that, again, depending on what season of life you're in, there is some trial and error. There's a lot of work I thought I would love, and then I got in, I'm like, I can do it, but boy, it really sucks the life out of me.
Exactly.
I put out a 10 effort and I get a 5 result. And then there's other stuff I put out a 7 effort and I get a 10 result,
Yeah.
And so I think you start to find where you're efficient, where you're gifted, what you love to do. And if you can find that with also results you believe in, you've really kind of found it. And so I would just encourage people, don't be afraid to have a little bit of trial and error there, but over time, start to really hone in and be able to fine tune your ability to see, like, hey, I don't just want to take that role because it's got a cool title, or because it's going to garner the respect of my peers because it's a step up, and my mom will be able to brag about that her son's a vice president or her daughter is a lead manager or whatever it might be, or entrepreneur. Does that work light me up? Yep. Does that work light me up? And I think when it does, you do go the extra mile. You end up becoming great at whatever that thing is. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Well, I think what you're just talking about is what we talked about in terms of good. You are fulfilling the purpose for which you were created, and you're doing work for which you were created, the way that you were crafted in your mother's womb. The reason that you're an 8 and I'm an 8 is because God has certain things he wants us to do, as opposed to somebody who's a 9 or a 1. Or I think for me, as I try to apply this to somebody maybe listening, is for us who are in leadership, I think it's really important we explain to people what the work is going to be. I mean, this is One Church is growing. You're great to listen to and be around, and so I want to be around this environment. It's growing, God's doing things, and I'll do anything just to be on staff. Well, that lasts a week.
Yeah.
And then as soon as you're given the job, you realize this isn't my gift, this isn't my genius, this isn't what I like to do. I can do it. And within a month, you're going to be complaining. And within 6 months, you're going to be gone. And we could do a better job of explaining, okay, this is what 45 hours a week is going to be like.
Yeah.
Does that light you up? Because if you only get excited 1 hour a week when you're in church, the other 45 are going to be miserable.
I think the other piece of that too is, in a dynamic organization that's growing, you get hired in for one thing and it changes. Yeah. So the youth pastor or whatever, again, the role that you came in, as the thing grows, your job, even though you may have the same title, what it takes to do that job fundamentally changes.
Exactly.
In a smaller church, the kids pastor works with kids. In a larger church, kids pastor works with adults who work with kids.
Exactly.
So,
which is a different skill set.
Yeah. Do you want to run puppets and present, or do you want to develop leaders? Those are same title, different role, and sometimes it changes while you're there.
Yeah.
So that's where one of the reasons what we try to do is normalize attrition a little bit in the appropriate way, to go, hey, you're not a quitter.
Exactly.
You're not relationally radioactive. if you decide, hey, this job is no longer for me, because once you got in, maybe the reality of what it is, you go, I thought I would like it, I don't. And I'm not going to hang on just because I don't want to be a quitter. Or it may have fundamentally changed and you go, I like the old job better, the new job not so much. And so to be able to do that without it getting weird or people getting hurt.
Yeah, honor their season of service.
Absolutely.
Honor them and thank them, but everybody realizes the change is good for everybody.
Yeah. Hey, man, appreciate you very much.
Well,
Thank you. Thank you for
Thanks.
your investment in my life. Thank you for your investment in our church. And let's do this again sometime.
Yeah, it brings me nothing but joy. So thanks.
Yeah, man. God bless.